Hello, I'm Brandon Charles West, the author of the Scarlet Hopewell series and the upcoming Pillaging the Sun. Today I thought I'd do a little bit of a departure and share with you, for lack of a better term, a micro memoir of my trip to Paris. I hope you enjoy it. Remember to like and subscribe, and I look forward to hearing from you in the comments. An immense impression from an extraordinary place. Introduction 21 September 2022, Prince William, Virginia. My fondness for France began with my immigrant maternal great grandfather, who was nurtured through a desired connection to his son, and was entrenched through the lenses of Dickens' prose and Hemingway's memoir. My great grandfather was so bent on integrating, on becoming American, that he did not speak French in his home or talk much of his childhood, and a bit of my family's history faded as a result. I never met my great grandfather, but my grandfather and I were so very close. Losing him when I was 5 had a profound impact in the years that followed, and I found myself chasing his memory, his hobbies, his legend, just to keep that relationship alive. My grandfather was an autodidact and a brilliant man. He was a war hero, Marine, father, and husband. He was a voracious reader and marked Hemingway as one of his favorites. I devoured Hemingway when I discovered this fact, and soon found myself reading and rereading A Movable Feast. I took French in high school, delighted that I would soon speak the language my great grandfather had shunned. Paris became a romantic fantasy that not only connected me to a part of my heritage, but me to my grandfather through Hemingway, and Hemingway through my desire to become a writer. I first visited France with my wife in 2001, just before an army deployment to Kosovo from Germany. We didn't have much money. It was our one trip before I would have to leave for 6 to 9 months, and we stayed in a small room with our dog, who we had to metro to the Louvre in order to find a patch of dirt for her to do her business. She was not going on the concrete. She made this quite clear. Funny dog walking adventures aside, I believe it is on this trip that my wife too became entranced, walking along the left bank, hiking up to Sacre Coeur, picnicking under the Eiffel Tower on baguettes and cheese we bought from a grocery store to save money. It would be 20 years before I would return, this time a published writer with dual incomes and a bit more freedom to explore the city. What follows is adapted from my musings, taking with a number 2 pencil on a pocket electrum notebook that I took with me everywhere. We'll shower after petit déjeuner, 7 September 2022, Paris, France. While my petite wife fared better, I arrived in the morning on a flight bound in a straitjacket, shoulders aching and feeling as if I was too broad for the normal world. They'd improved the entertainment available for international travel, but not the seats, at least not in coach. Customs and baggage claim was uneventful, as France and England seemed to have mastered the process of receiving guests from friendly nations. The outskirts of Paris, driving from Charles de Gaulle, lowered my spirits a bit. They had risen considerably with the ability to stretch my full width and having fully escaped the man grabbing my headrest for the previous 8 hours. Paris has a way of capturing your imagination, and therefore your expectations well before you arrive, and as such, you expect everything to have a romantic charm. But unlike any city, there is often little charm for the city beyond the city. It does not get the attention, and in turn the money. It is by no means any worse and probably better than New York or DC, but it is typical, and you don't expect anything about Paris to be mundane. Our first destination was the Marriott Ambassador at 16 Rue Haussmann, a hotel built for conventions and business, but clean and welcoming and ready, even though complaints arose to the room's size and location. I think A might have been disappointed for me, as she had experienced better locations in her previous travels, certainly places with more character. Regardless, we placed our luggage in the room, washed our hands and our faces, and we walked. A trip out to get food turned into a 13-mile tour of Paris, with A's legs cramping and eyes exhausted as I've been since the army. Napoleon's tomb, a grandiose lacquered wood self-tribute fit for legend, views of the Eiffel Tower across Place de Carrousel, the Champs-Élysées, the wide, grand avenue flanked by manicured elms ending in the Arc de Triomphe, proud and Roman, the ruins and restoration of Notre Dame, sad but hopeful, the Seine, left and right banks, different personalities of the same city, a cheese board to tide us over for dinner we never ate. We covered a lot of ground, and I fell unconscious before 9 and did not stir until morning. Musings from the cafe. 8 September 2022, Paris, France. I sit in the Café de Flore in Saint Germain drinking a café au lait, rich in taste and price. Yesterday we laughed at the rain with umbrellas and waterproofs. Today I'm eating salade de fruits in the shade as Paris passes by in the sunshine. I may be over romanticizing, but then again it's Paris, and as the plump raspberries burst with sweetness, paired with sour grapefruit and soothed with the creamy sweet bitterness of the café au lait, I am quite content with such grandiosity, especially seeing as it's only the second day. I think of A as I drink the coffee, and how this is her perfect boisson chaude. The cafe serves it in two separate small carafes to be poured to your liking. Milk in France is not the same as in the US. It's something more, something pure, something that even in its less fattening forms is so much like cream. On cue, thinking of a waiter clad in his waistcoat and bow tie brings a woman a glass filled with whipped cream. And as different as this cafe is from her place on the couch at home, I can see A in her robe, book in hand, coffee topped with enough cream for dessert. Café de Fleur is more interesting, perhaps, than the quiet cafe where Hemingway wrote of the oysters in one true sentence. And it is fascinating that this many years later, his legacy and those of Fitzgerald and Joyce can fill the tables, lying steady out front of the Café de Fleur and Les Deux Margots. I wonder if many of the young people posing for their selfies even know why they're taking the picture, why they find the cafe so enticing. I doubt it. They don't seem to see beyond the small screens that their made up faces fill, the cafe only a backdrop for their own self absorption. Less appreciation than the pigeon, dark gray feathers, nearly black, his neck shimmering purple, who has wandered under my table and hopped over my feet. People in pigeon watching are truly no better or cliche than at a Paris cafe, and I have firmly decided that my favorite is the natural blonde Frenchwoman. Not just the coloring of her hair, but the features that always seem to associate with the natural flaxen hue. The shape of her face, the petite, confident stature, her mouth pink, the cupid's bow of her upper lip pronounced and pouting, the bottom lip turned down, a challenge to make smile, mystery hinted at and narrated by those who observe her. Despite the shade of her hair, they remind me of our Meredith, and as much as she loved New York, I can imagine she too would be entranced by this city, and so easily fit into its beauty. Bookstores are next for me, and a bit of walking with the hope of getting the 7 or 9 metro line to avoid transport. One more drink, an espresso, and then I'll move on. I don't want to, but it seems unfair to stay, and I could easily run out of money if I continue to order. The Fleur and the Margot have seized on the nostalgia of a bygone era and are making the most of it. Unique to Paris price gouging is that they have not sacrificed quality. Everything has been superb. Monte Cristo in Light, 9 September 2022, Paris, France. On the third day, I sat in the Luxembourg Gardens by the south facade of the palace, content and thinking of the previous night's visit to Bar Hemingway. How special it was because A made it so, and I'll cherish the memory. Decadent, expensive, nostalgic, and wonderful. A beautiful and so full of life and curiosity. Her smile when she pointed out that the empty table was kept for Hemingway, sipping at her clean and dirty martini with its ice cube olive, and I, with my herb filled aperitif, my heart will forever be joyful. We ate Japanese for dinner in a young, hip, crowded restaurant that was so stuffy it threatened the evening until we requisitioned control of the windows and set our lungs free. I woke early beside A, warm and full, and she woke, and then all was right and happy. We had a breakfast of croissants and cheese and pain au chocolat, butter and cream and savory eggs, all washed down with espresso and fresh pressed juice. Then she off to work, and me into the city. My plans to see Sainte-Chapelle had diverted me toward the gardens early, and from the gardens to the bookstores where I found my copy of Le Comte de Monte Cristo. I sat in quiet thought upon the wooden chairs with their woven wicker seats inside St. Sulpice, and thought not of religion, but of Jesus and his Judeo-Christian Buddhist philosophy, of how a desire to raise such a kind voice to glory could inspire such wonders, and for a moment I let go of the pain and pessimism that comes with the whole truth. I returned to Café de Fleur to wait out my time to enter Sainte Chapelle, and because I liked it in the crowded cafe. I ordered the duck confit, my splurge of food for my time in Paris. I could think of no better place to order it than in this atmosphere. The cost of Paris is substantial, but I have a feeling that through exploration and knowing the city, its costs could be mitigated so that its wonders could be enjoyed for perhaps a retired couple, including one dreamy eyed writer. Paris has a way of stealing your desire to travel so long as you remain in Paris, else it leaves in you a compulsion to return. Is it possible to have wanderlust for the very place in which you sit? My seat was at the corner of the cafe on the Rue de Saint Benoît and the Boulevard Saint Germain, and as such I became the background for dozens of travel photos and selfies. Perhaps one day those might crop up, me with my notebook, people wondering what I'd been writing about, not realizing I was writing of them. While hoping that the sun held so that the chapel famous for its glass would reveal itself in full glory, the duck arrived, and I got my first scent of the richness of the dish. It was perfect, succulent in such a way that it was almost creamy. Salt and fat in balance, the savory taste of anami only just washed away by the Pellegrino, and afterward the heavy fat disposed by the creamy milk of the cafe au lait, as the bitter sweet of the coffee replaced the saltiness. I watched a boy and girl on bikes by the cafe just before I left. They arrived to mill about indecisively, locking and then unlocking their bikes. I waited for my bill, fully a part of the dining experience in Paris, and they remained for 10 minutes or more, she dressed in white lace and tennis shoes, her skirt short and her sleeves puffy. He wore a tan suit. He was as young and as beautiful as she, their hair of shared hues, his blonde as autumn sunshine, hers of fallen leaves. When they had decided their milling about was over, they unlocked the bikes a final time and left, never, that I could see, having done or seen anything but each other. Back at the hotel, showered and cleaned from the day's long walks, I felt a bit foolish for the romantic drivel I had committed to my little Electrum notebook, but I couldn't help it. Walking up into Sainte Chapelle, I think how rare it is when the eyes are insufficient to take in the beauty of something made by man. Ascending from circular stairs of stone, it is like emerging up into an ocean reef. Awash with color, the clouds break, and the sun shines through the glass and sends the colors dancing, and I can't leave. Never has a coral reef had a rival in my eyes, but today I was and am in awe. Afterward, I'd gone to the Musée d'Orsay, and I felt let down following Sainte Chapelle's spectacle of light. I spent time with Van Gogh, Monet, and the view from behind the clock out into the city, but my heart hadn't left Sainte Chapelle. Later, I waited for a cappuccino and A at the hotel bar, wondering which would arrive first, and I read my recap of the day. I began with the metro en route to Sainte Chapelle, discovered I need tickets, bought them for 1300 on my phone, and headed to Luxembourg Gardens. I sat and wrote and felt the spell of Paris take hold. I spoke sloppy French at bookstores until I found my copy of Monte Cristo. I saw Saint Sulpice and Fontaine Saint Michel and took pictures and ate duck confit at Café de Fleur. I walked and felt joyous and looked as deeply as I was able at Van Gogh's brushstrokes and then researched a place to eat Thai for dinner. A arrived first. Thai was good and the restaurant quiet, and we walked afterward up the hill to Sacre-Cœur and looked out over the city as two rainbows graced the sky, one bright and vivid, the other just a suggestion. We'd taken Rue des Martyrs, mostly to the church, but then ended up left at the basilica, and then got lost on our way back, hoping to find the ice cream spot we'd stopped in on the way. We crisscrossed streets, meandered, and found it. We ate gelato shaped like roses from swift movements of the barista's spatula, and tired, we were happy. A train to the chateau. 10 September 2022, Amboise, France. Aboard a TGV train to Tours, and then on to Chambray-le-Tour to embark on a trip to see the Chateau of Loire. Not all adventures, even ones with the backdrop of Paris, are smooth, and this one begins patchy. Often, despite reading the same story, you can be on different pages. But we are now safely tucked away in business class seats, and I'm watching the French countryside while A reads. I wish the girls were here with us. There's so much to see, although now it will be so much to show them. I'd like to take my mother as well. The problem with U.S. architecture, and in the converse, what makes places like London and most especially Paris so beautiful, is the driving purpose behind the buildings. An American building is about how big, efficient, and cheaply it can be made so that it can make as much money as possible in the quickest amount of time. Our beautiful structures exist, but only in sporadic bursts of artistic expression, or in the capital where a city was created as a statement of democracy with hints of Rome and Greece and Europe. In Paris, the city itself is such an artistic expression, in nearly every common and uncommon structure. In a Mood, 11 September 2022, Amboise to Paris, France. Gurus of all sorts like to say that no one can make you feel anything. Try living with a magnificently complicated, glorious woman with whom life has become intertwined in every way imaginable, and say that with any confidence. The afternoon has fallen apart, and I feel crappy. Once we are out of St. Pierre and our layover past, I'll write of the beauty and grandeur of Amboise and the chateau. I realize that I'll be beginning with the bad and leaving all that was good before to end, but that's how I feel, and it's hard to write about the other just now. The train is crowded. We had to argue for our seats, and the door to the toilet has been opening and closing with the frequency, but not the soothing regularity of a metronome. We sit with a young woman who was no doubt beautiful before she let her weight go unchecked, and I wonder if people think similarly of me. She sits beside a tall, handsome boyfriend who has the look of a man who fell in love with a smaller woman, but loves more or less of her. I thought the evening we arrived back in Paris destined for quiet ruin, or at least a postictal calm. But we walked to the Café La Fleur for dinner, and Paris revived us. On the left bank, we ate well and decided to walk off the heavy cheese jockey sandwiches in Luxembourg Gardens. I took A to the gate that I had exited on the previous visit and showed her the tennis courts, empty now, but told her how they had been full in the middle of the workday. We walked out over the fountain by the palace and were chased out of the garden by whistling security guards as the park closed for sunset. We stumbled upon a boisterous, joyful band of young students outside the Pantheon and walked by Sorbonne and the Seine, serenaded by street musicians, being cheered by smiling locals and tourists who blended into a party of joy and art and everything you dream of Paris. Crossing over from the left bank, it was as if the Seine and the Ile de City lowered a curtain on the party and the play of joy behind us, the stark difference jarring. But our route took us down Rue de Saint Denis, and Paris again came alive, this time with a gauntlet that could have been a vibrant food scene from any great city, so long as you didn't look up. There is uniformity to Paris, not such that it is ever dull, never dull, but such that it always maintains its cohesive, purposeful beauty. Whether wild and full of song and laughter, whether bustling and full of the scent of 100 different cuisines, it is Paris. It is romantic beaux art structures, iron balcony railings, and carved stone. It is Renaissance, Gothic, and Baroque, all blended into the unique style that is the City of Love. Remembering Loire, 12 September 2022, Paris, France. Sitting outside the cafe near the gates to Père Lachaise, drinking coffee and preparing for my last day in Paris, I wrote of Loire. Our train stopped at Tours, and we boarded a bus to the hospital in Chambray-le-Tour. This was the closest stop to the six where we'd be renting our car, but it was most certainly odd and led us through the suburbs of Chambray, behind a French supermarket, past a local mediathèque, past apartment buildings and duplexes with paths and a playground. After passing by car dealerships and restaurants, we arrived at the Sixth, where a young man who had spent 2 years as an au pair in Minneapolis informed us that the bargain electric Fiat would not get us where we needed to go. We accepted a brand new Mercedes and left the suburbs for the stunning beauty of Amboise in the Loire Valley. What might have been bookended by some negativity was filled with the grand chateau of kings, the last home of Leonardo da Vinci, laughter, A's arms and mine, and the charm of Amboise. We walked the annex of Chateau de Chenonceau, spanning the river and hopping arches, a fairy tale scene created by a jealous queen. The sleek black AMG purred down country roads to a hunting lodge the size of a small city, Chambord, with its mesmerizing staircase and forest of ornate spires looking out onto gardens raveled only by Versailles. After walking the cobblestone streets of Amboise and eating scallop and leek crepes, covered with crisp cheese, We slept long in the quiet of our room at the Novotel, just on the outskirts of the Renaissance village. The morning brought us to Chateau Le Clos Lucie, Leonardo da Vinci's last home. We stood in his footsteps and walked his grounds. I played with reproductions of his inventions and laughed as a black cat, bursting from the bushes in a rather aggressive bid for affection, chased A from our bench. It was magic. The chateau and its ethereal gardens were an oasis, and neither A nor I wanted to leave, and for hours all was hope and light. The last day. My walk through the cemetery was quiet and cool. The nature of the graves and their markers creates a city of the dead, beautiful but haunting. Oscar Wilde and Chopin's bodies lie within, and people come to pay homage to the man apart or the maestro, or to take pictures with the idea of Jim Morrison and Gertrude Stein. I took the metro, now crowded and sporadically delayed, to the new Shakespeare and Company. Not the same building where Hemingway borrowed books from Sylvia Beach, but of the same spirit, and situated in one of the greatest spots of all my Paris walks. Upstairs, reserved for readers and writers, I sat at an Underwood typewriter and smiled. What else to do for a seeker of the movable feast? I drank bitter coffee with two Spanish ladies, a view of Notre Dame across the Seine, Roman ruins, and Saint Severin just a stone's throw away. It was warm, bordering on hot, and I welcomed the cool stone of the carved bench while I waited for my time to visit the Louvre. I walked from Shakespeare and Company, buying some painted postcards at a stall along the Seine for the girls and my mother. With the bags I'd purchased from Shakespeare and Company, the glass from Saint Chapelle, and chocolate cherries, I thought they would make nice gifts. I missed them, but I wanted to bring them to Paris, not so much go home to see them. The Louvre was crowded and hot, and no one seemed to know why they were there beyond the opportunity to take a selfie with the Mona Lisa. I took my time with her. I didn't want to just pass by. The same with Winged Victory and Venus de Milo. I don't always understand why this art is of such greatness and this is not, but I wish to look, to at least decide because I had looked and saw. The apartments of Napoleon III were a lesson in opulence and grandeur, and the most interesting thing in the Louvre. My last evening in Paris was for the eyes and for holding on. The Tour Eiffel loomed. We packed into elevators like sardines and rose some 300 meters into the sky over Paris to see the city of light as no one can except from the tower. Perhaps Montparnasse offers a better view, as the Eiffel Tower would be in sight, but I'll leave that for the next trip, for how can there not be another? The city is beautiful from the sky as it is beautiful from the top of Sacré-Cœur as it is from the street at the Café de Flore. I held A, pressed against the safety screen, and watched the city reveal its sobriquet. We descended from the middle level by the stairs, and the tower lit up in a sparkling shower of lights, and A smiled, happy because she had so wanted me to see it. That night I slept fitfully. Tomorrow I would leave. A Memory Chateau, 13 September 2022, Paris, France. Charles de Gaulle Airport. I made it to my gate, gifts in hand after a trip through the duty-free mall and a pret-a-manger cheddar and chutney sandwich consumed. Now to wait and think of what I leave behind. I don't have any homesickness for the U.S., a land with so much and so little appreciation. France is not always convenient. Surely they have much to learn in the way of les toilettes and air conditioning, but they have an appreciation for their city, for their country, for their language and culture. They have an identity beyond themselves that flows through language to art and architecture, through food and social interaction. I will miss France. I will read and learn and prepare for my return, but in the meantime, I'll miss it. Perhaps at home I can dream of another life in Clos Lucie. Perhaps where romantic walks with A will turn to trysts in the garden, and then old we will still walk and listen to the water, and I'll chase away the cat for her, and later secretly feed him, because I know she wants me to. Thank you.